Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh. I'm your host, and I always love introducing the podcast and just by starting by saying thank you. I started this podcast to really guide people on the spiritual journey and to really simplify what spirituality really means, and the messages we receive on a weekly basis really confirm that the message is getting through. So thank you for everyone that's listened and supported. My name is Nimesh. I love guiding people to truly shine their light. I'm a spiritual coach, mentor, an Akashic record reader, Akashic trainer, and a podcast host and a podcast creator. And this is a beautiful time to guide people. So I feel very, very blessed with the work I get to do. And I couldn't do this podcast without my regular co-host, Stacey. So introducing the amazing, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, and now published author, Stacey Brown. Stacey, do you want to introduce yourself? I have to introduce you that way, right? Some things never change.
Yeah, so it's good to be here, Nims. Thanks so much for having me. I love taking care of our clients in the ways that we do, and one of the ways that we get to nurture them is through this podcast. My name is Stacey. I'm an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also a spiritual coach and mentor, an Akashic record reader, and I love this podcast and the time that we have together. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And so we're recording this on July the 1st. It's going to be published on July the 8th. And, we pick this. So normally we pick topics months in advance, but actually we picked this topic today just because it's kind of what we felt with the energy that's happening around. And so today we're going to be talking about balancing the divine feminine and the divine masculine energies, exploring really the divine feminine and the masculine energies, and really kind of finding balance. And the reason we felt it was important today is a lot of the conversations we've been having and I've been having recently has been around a lot of people trying to find balance between feminine and masculine. And I really feel like we're moving into the age, more and more into the age of the feminine. And feminine is all about the spiritual journey, more about the heart, more about our emotions. And the masculine energy is all about, kind of taking charge and really kind of focusing and certainly around money. And, if you look at last few centuries, etc., it's all been about the masculine. It's all been about power, wars and all. And I really do feel that we are moving into more of the energy and the vibration of the heart. And that means I do feel like certainly recently there's been a crisis around the masculine energy. And I don't mean male and female, because all of us have divine masculine, divine energy and divine masculine energy in us, right? So this is what I mean is like a lot of people are struggling financially and struggling with identity and finding balance, and the masculine in them I really feel is kind of feeling a bit lost. And that's why if you check in with your energy and how have you been feeling recently, check in with how balanced do you feel? What's your heart like and what's your head like? How do you feel connected to the energies around you? What's your relationship with money like? Maybe ask yourself, have you been struggling with divine masculine? Have you been struggling with balance? Would you say you have balance? And that's really the topic that we want to delve into today. So Stace, let me ask you, do you feel, what's your energies like between divine masculine, divine feminine, and do you feel like you have good balance?
I would say this is something that I have struggled with over time, for sure. I have always operated naturally in a more empathic state, in a more emotionally vulnerable state. And in this season, I find that I need to operate more in a space of the divine masculine and taking action and being focused in a different way. But it is not something that comes naturally to me. It's something I have to really work towards. And I'd be curious to see how many of our listeners feel the same way, that you operate in one space better than you do the other. And it might be that you operate better in the space of the divine masculine versus feminine. I've always been extremely empathic and nurturing and loving and tenderhearted and quite frankly vulnerable for lack of a better word. And the divine masculine is the complete opposite, right? It's a space where you're confident and you are taking action and you are thinking through the steps that you need to make stuff happen. And for me, I have to really, really practice that. And it is not something that has come easily for me. And I think it's one of the reasons why we work so well together.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I spent many years in the corporate world, and corporate is very much masculine, right? It's very much action oriented, assertive, the analytical or the logical, the very mental space. And I many years thrived in that environment, but I mean, I only left at the beginning of this year, but certainly the last couple of years, I struggled with um, the corporate environment and the energy and the vibration of it. And I feel that's also because I was moving more into, my healing abilities and my, the feminine side was expanding, and in whatever way, I couldn't stay in that, that masculine, that corporate type environment. So it is interesting the journey we're on. So that's why you ask a very good question to our listeners is, do you feel balanced right now? If you had to rate your divine feminine energy 0 to 10, 0 being nothing at all, 10 being really high, and then same for the divine masculine, just tap into it. It's not all about money. Like we said, divine feminine is all about the receptive and being intuitive. It's more the heart-led, nurturing, compassionate. It's a creative part, I guess. Masculine can be creative too, but feminine generally is more creative, being more adaptable. It is that being reflective, that inner energy, and really connecting. So if you were to rate them, where would you be? And for me, my journey's been interesting. I definitely leveraged my divine masculine in my corporate career. I was very successful, but it is, whatever that healer in me that was activated many years ago kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. It got to a point where actually I couldn't stay in that divine masculine environment. It's just, when I think about it, it was really interesting. So again, for our listeners, what areas are you strong in right now, and where are you struggling? And are they more divine masculine, divine feminine oriented? It's like when you start asking those sort of questions, you start to get a really different answer. And yeah, like I said, I've been feeling the divine masculine has been struggling. I recorded the Akashic message yesterday, and there was a lot of, kind of the divine masculine, the masculine struggling there too. So it's interesting. It is an interesting time. Like this whole year has been expansive. Karmic cycles closing. I really feel we're moving into an age of trying to find that balance between our energies now, which is different. Still expansive, still crazy, still going to be a lot of emotion, but it is about finding balance. It is about, I feel like all of us have gone through some kind of rebirth. And as we've gone through that rebirth, we have an opportunity to balance the divine masculine and the divine feminine. How does that sound to you, Stace?
I think that it's absolutely a challenge for so many. And I think about when we are accessing the Akashic records, do you feel that when we're in the records, you're more in one space versus the other?
That's an interesting question. So when I'm in my own records, I guess it's about balance. When I'm reading for somebody else, I feel like it's a lot to do with the other person, but I do feel the records generally are more about healing. So I feel they're more divine feminine, but also it's also about balance within the records. It's an interesting question. And it's also kind of, I feel like a lot of my times my energy is like a divine father type energy, divine brother or divine father. And a lot of people feel that with me. I just had that conversation with many people. But when you talk about divine father, divine, I don't know if that's as masculine as, it's really interesting. I feel like the last few centuries, like I said, has been very much aggressive masculine.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the masculine can also be very gentle. And this is why it's kind of, when you ask about the Akashic records, it's almost like the records transcend that, and it just is. It's not stronger in the masculine, it's not stronger in the feminine. It is more of a balanced energy.
Hmm.
But if I had to pick humanly, I'd say it's more divine feminine. But when I'm in it, it definitely feels more balanced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I just think it's interesting because we provide such a unique experience with the way that we do Akashic record readings, that there's this kind of dance that we do where I tap in more to the divine feminine, you tap in more to the divine masculine, and we kind of do this dance with people that is really powerful. And I don't know if it's like that when you're reading the records without me. If it's a different experience, I would say it's probably unique in and of itself. But I've kind of been in awe of us and what we've created because we do things so much differently than other people do. And it's provided such a unique experience for so many people to have that representation of both through a reading.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, when I'm doing a reading on my own, it does feel weird sometimes. But it's yeah. I mean, so again, I guess side note: if anybody does want a reading, we do provide a unique experience where you get to get a reading from a divine feminine, a divine masculine, very balanced spiritually. So yeah, reach out if you want a reading. But yeah, as you explored, it's interesting. It's like, if you think about some of the past lives we access during a reading, a lot of them are quite, like, sometimes wars come up, sometimes, it's kind of like a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, and it does feel like sometimes the masculine is more around the pain around wars, and the feminine is more around the pain around love and heartbreak. But it's like a lot of the past lives that come up, again, they're all different, but I feel like maybe that's what we've been going through the last few centuries, but I feel like a lot more of them are on the masculine side. I never thought about that before this episode, by the way. So you brought a different angle to the whole conversation, but it is an interesting thought. As we go through the healing that we've gone through in this lifetime, which accesses past lives and the rest of it, the karma releasing, it does feel very masculine orientated.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, I'd love to hear more about your journey. As you said, you're naturally more of the divine feminine. How do you feel about the divine masculine in you?
I think it's been a challenge for me, and I can go back to my relationship with my father. And my father was very much in the masculine energy, very action focused, very driven, very matter of fact. Um, I believe he wanted to have a tender side, but I don't believe that it came naturally to him. And I feel like it automatically like thrust me in the opposite direction where I felt the need to be very extreme in my feminine energy, which is interesting because in a lot of ways, day to day, I do have like more of the divine masculine traits, but I operate in the space more of the divine feminine. And I believe that it comes from the relationship that I had with my father or the lack thereof. And it's something that I've struggled with for a really long time. And it's something that I really want to overcome. Like, I really have a desire to find more balance in the energy that I carry, because I do believe that everything um, that we do requires both, right? To be in balance, we really need both energies. And I feel like I'm like a seesaw that's a little off balance. And, there's more of the space of the divine feminine than there is the divine masculine. And so the question that I ask myself is, how do I bring in more of that masculine energy?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, it is about balance, right? Because if you think about the divine feminine, like we said, it's always associated with intuition, nurturing, creativity, which is great, right? Especially when you're on the spiritual journey and you're kind of trying to activate your gifts. But you need the divine masculine for action, kind of, I guess, connection with your guides in some way, but also the logic. And it's like, in some ways, the masculine is almost connected to more to the human, the ego. But it is also, when I think about my journey, a lot of people talk about star signs and horoscopes. I think the soul journey is a bit deeper than that. But yeah, when I started in the corporate, I'm an Aries. So when I started in the corporate career, I was very much action oriented. It was very much, kind of leading by example and, kind of managing people that sort of way. But I always felt like I did it from the heart. So I didn't fully belong in that space. I never fully felt like I belonged. So it's interesting as you explore it now, finding that balance. And it's like, when I look at you, it's like your healing journey has really been accelerated and activated even more over the last few years. But you're still very action orientated.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about your dad, you kind of notice that your programming is maybe on the masculine, but what you do in a natural healer perspective is more on the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, I guess, a little bit easier when you're looking at, when you know somebody as well as we do, and I'm looking at your energies rather than mine. It's almost easier for me to see that in you than sometimes in me, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like in me, maybe I'm delusional, but I like to think I'm quite balanced. Sometimes I am more feminine. It's like more. If I had a choice, I'd spend more time on the spiritual side, kind of connecting with my guides and, kind of floating around and enjoying that journey. And sometimes I have to become more masculine because there's things we need to get done, right? It's the action orientated. It's the, sometimes the social media, the admin that goes behind a lot of the work that we do. It's almost like you have to force yourself to come down to become that divine masculine. So that balance is really important. But having said that, and when you think about divine brother, divine father, that energy is very protective. So it's still needed, right? We still need that nurturing element from a divine father, divine brother, because it is very nurturing, but more from a protective perspective, where the divine mother and the divine sister is more loving from an emotional perspective. Both are needed. Both are just as important. So I'm curious, what have you been doing to kind of find that balance between divine feminine, divine masculine? What are you doing to kind of make sure that, I guess, the divine masculine has been nurtured? And I love putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks for putting me on the spot. Like I said, I feel like operating in the space of the divine feminine comes very naturally to me, right? So I have to make a little bit more effort when it comes to the masculine. And I think about my morning today. I'll just give the example of my morning. And as a healer in working with clients, I feel like I was operating in the space of the divine feminine. But then I have a newsletter and a blog post that goes out each month, and the planning and the intention behind that and the action behind that is more in the space of the masculine, right? I have to take action to make a plan, to make it happen, to deliver the message. And so I'm tapping into that masculine energy of the planning and the action steps to make it happen. So I would say there are ways that, as I'm like running my business and the behind the scenes, I would say in a lot of that way, I'm tapping into the divine masculine and how am I going to run my business and how am I going to move forward and what am I going to do and what's my plan of action? All of those things feel very masculine driven. And I think that's where a lot of my motivation comes from. And then when I'm in the role of healer and I'm in that space of nurturing people, then I go more into the divine feminine. So it's interesting because when I'm working with clients, for me, that's the easy part, right? Like that's the space where I'm in my most natural environment. I feel the most aligned. But then there's like the marketing and the branding and the all the behind the scenes stuff that's the masculine part of things that I would say I just naturally struggle with because it doesn't come second nature to me the way that the energy of the divine feminine does.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's definitely food for thought. And I hope it's kind of generating some thoughts and some deep insights for our listeners, because it is interesting when it's like when you start considering who's influenced you, and if you look at them, are they more masculine, are they more feminine? Because it's all of it's needed, right? I mean, when I think about masculine, speaking your truth, standing in your power, is more masculine than feminine. Whereas, you know, when you're standing in your power, you're speaking your truth, and you're speaking from the heart. Does that message come from the masculine or the feminine, right? You need both. So, and I'm same as you. I'm in my best element when I'm working with clients and kind of guiding them, reading the Akashic records. It feels more natural to who I am. But you asked me about Akashic records. I guess when I'm healing, I'm more on the feminine side. But when I'm mentoring, I feel like I tap into both. I mean, you see me sometimes, right? I'll drop a simple sentence into a conversation, and I'll kind of drop a truth bomb, but I'll let it drop, and I'll let it sink in kind of very quickly. But then I'll give it time to let it kind of fester and let it. And those sort of gifts are important, right? There's it's interesting. It's like the healing side I feel is more feminine. The mentorship side I think is more balanced, because sometimes we need to hold space, right? When somebody's going through something. And sometimes we need to give somebody a little nudge when when we need to, right? Kind of hold people accountable. But it really is interesting, an interesting vibration. Like I said, right now, when you talk about the vibration, I do feel that we're having for many of us, a crisis of identity. And it's like so many people want to know what's coming and can feel change, can feel something different in them, and are struggling with kind of allowing whatever's coming next to happen, because we all want control. And again, masculine is control. Is very much want a plan of action, want to take action, want to know what's coming. And it's the head and the heart. Again, both are needed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why this topic felt important. And because once you get awareness of what's happening around you, so if you can empathize and recognize the crisis of finding balance between feminine and masculine within you, once you get that awareness, that helps you understand what's happening. And that's when you can become a researcher and kind of start to, okay, what is my relationship with divine masculine like? And actually, you can start with that by thinking about and feeling your energies around your influences growing up. But another big clue is also your relationship with money. Because for me, money is very much masculine, more masculine than feminine. How you spend it and how much you spend on your loved ones and all that, of course, can be more feminine. But actually, the vibration of money to me feels more masculine.
I would
What
agree
about
with
you?
that. I would agree
Mm.
with that. And I would say, I think that a lot of people are struggling with that. I guess my question to you as we're talking about this is, do you think that people are struggling more with one energy than the other? Or do you feel like it's a very individual struggle, whether it's masculine or feminine?
I mean, I think it's all of the above, really. I do feel that um, recently I feel like more people have been struggling with the masculine than the feminine. I feel uh, like for the mass consciousness, it has been more, but that doesn't say there's no examples of people that are struggling on the more the feminine side. It's just vibrationally, we've been in the masculine for so long.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the last centuries, I live in the UK, right? The British Empire and all the wars and all the control and all the power struggles, the politics. It's all on the masculine. And that's kind of been the defining energy for centuries. And we're influenced by that, right? You're influenced by the energies around you. Whereas now, when it's more about the heart, there's like so much emotion out there, people reacting, the cancel culture. It's becoming more emotional because arguably we're in the age of the feminine, or we're entering it, depends on how you feel and how you look at it. And that is why people are having the crisis, right? We're already individually feeling so much change. We've all been through so much this year, so many karmic closes, there's so many planetary activities, so much activity. We feel like we've been on a roller coaster. Stacey, I'm sure you can relate. So it's that roller coaster, and with all that change, and now we're shifting from more masculine to feminine, it just adds to that change. So, whatever you're going through as an individual, whether it's more on the masculine or the feminine side, the energy around, because we're moving into the age of the feminine, is going to affect you. So it's like, it's not always easy to answer your question, because individually we're all going through mass change. And then you're going to be influenced by the changes that are happening to the more wider, and that is more on the feminine than the masculine side. But when the masculine struggles, that's when all these wars and anger and all this stuff starts to come up, because the masculine wants to do something about it, wants to fight back. And that's why you're getting so much emotion out there right now. It's just, and this is why so many light workers have been activated. This is why so many people out there with their gifts, with their, really questioning who they are, can feel something different, are starting to feel more than think, because we're entering this. So this was kind of, again, just my 2 cents. I really feel this mass change was planned. This is all part of Mother Nature's plan. As a lot of healers talk about moving from 3D to 5D, and this is a lot of healers being activated to truly shine the light. And that's what I feel what we do is so important right now. It's that, if you're listening to the podcast, you have, I'm sure, have some gifts that are being activated. You are a light worker. You chose to be here as a soul. And it's time for you to really ask yourself, why are you here? How are you going to serve? And it's that, sometimes we get stuck in victim mode and why me? Why does those? If we can change that to truly understand that everything that's happening to us is somehow activating something in us. And it is really about how you're going to serve, which is why I love our mentorship program. And as a side note, I guess, as we go, the mentorship program we have is really all about this. It's really about activating your gifts, activating who you really are, releasing your programming, helping you find balance between divine, feminine, and masculine. Really working on your 4 bodies and really helping you understand, what are you working on? Where do you need the healing? Where do you need? And I love doing it, because it's just the journey we take people on over 3 months is crazy. It's like anyone that does it has been preparing for the mentorship program for years, and it's just, we come along and we accelerate their journey, but you've done the prep. So if our voices resonate, you feel that we can guide you, then reach out. We'd love to take you through what we do, and maybe there's a connection. How do you feel about the energy around us, Stace, when I ask you to tap in and really kind of what is happening in the divine feminine, divine masculine? What do you feel?
I feel in the world right now, there is a shift happening for sure. I feel that there is a lot of masculine energy in politics and world events, etc. But I feel the key right now is more of the divine feminine healing energy. And I feel like there's a balance that we need of both in order to make this shift happen. So for me personally, the challenge is bringing in more of that masculine energy into the work that I do, into the way that I handle myself on a day-to-day basis, in the way that I run my business. And I feel like a lot of us are being challenged to do things differently than we've done them before. I think that's the other part of this is like a lot of us have been doing things instinctively for a really long time, and maybe we haven't been as successful with the outcome as we would like to be because we're not balanced in both energies. And you really do need both, right? We really, in order to have balance and achieve alignment, we need to have a healthy dose of both divine masculine and feminine energy. And when we're leaning too much into one versus the other, that's when we can feel off kilter. And just being completely transparent, I feel that this has been a struggle for me. I feel that this is something that I work really hard to try to find that balance and try to find that the happy medium. But I tend to, if I'm not paying attention, go into that divine feminine energy because that's what I know so well. And I'm sure that some of our listeners can relate, whether it's that you're more in the divine masculine versus feminine. We all have, I believe, one area that we're stronger in than the other. And that balance for the opposing can be challenging. I don't think I'm the only one who struggles with this.
Yeah. It is interesting. And when you start to kind of what you're healing and what you're kind of dealing with from a trauma perspective gives you a lot of clues. So if you go back and think about, okay, well, what healing have you been doing? What have you been releasing? And kind of as you're growing up, were you impacted more by the masculine and the feminine? And that starts to give you a lot of clues. So you're right. A lot of people have been going through and struggling with the different sides, and but doing that shadow work, doing the inner child work, is kind of where you start to get the clues. And then you think about your programming, right? The societal conditioning, the religious it's that, arguably religion is quite rules based. And the rules and actions are more masculine. But again, there's balance there too, right? Because I think religion by its nature is very loving, but it's our interpretation are very rules based. And I think that's where the conflict and the challenge comes, right?
Yeah, it just kind of gave me a sick pit in my stomach when you said that.
I know. I could like, it's like, again, it's easier for me to look at it when I look at you. When I look at the healing that you've been doing, a lot of it, anyone that's read your book can see and feel the impact that your dad had on you, right? So that's very masculine. And then you came from the Mormon church. Again, the control that comes with that, I also feel this. And we've talked about this many times before. I feel your journey in this lifetime is a lot about healing the masculine. Not
Very
just
much
for
so.
you, but also I think you chose to heal ancestrally. So you're taking one for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Any
Yeah.
advice for people going through that?
Well, it's interesting because as you were talking, it just made me go to a space of remembering what it was like in the church and how everything was male or masculine dominated. And the women were expected to be submissive or passive or agreeable to whatever that masculine role requested or said. And even to speak it right now gives me like a sick pit in my stomach because it was ingrained in me from as young as I can remember that women were less than. And whoa, I'm really having a moment right now. I'm really like thinking about how much that impacted me. So yes, it was my father played a big role in that, but also the programming that I received as a child, the message was if you operate in the space of the feminine energy, you are less than or you are weak. And I did not realize that until we are just now having this conversation.
Wow, isn't it interesting what this podcast brings up?
It's making me really stop and think about what impact that had on me and how I went to the opposite side, right? Like I grew up in this kind of male dominated world and immediately leaned into the feminine, but then the feminine subconsciously I've been taught is less than. And so even though I'm a powerful healer, there is obviously still part of me that feels that I am less than because I am not operating in the space of the masculine energy. Holy cow.
I'm just letting that sit with our listeners for a second. Because that is it. Without that awareness, there's nothing we can do. And this is why going on a journey of self-discovery, to really ask yourself where are you, and doing the healing work, acknowledging and releasing the trauma, challenging your conditioning, your programming. But the healing really requires, and Stacey, you're one of the most vulnerable people I know, but that's one of your strengths. You can be vulnerable on this podcast and share at such a deep level. And I feel that's where a lot of your breakthroughs come, right? It's from talking. Some people love to talk about what they're going through, and that helps them to understand it. And it's a way of processing. And I feel there's a lot of power and strength when you do that.
I didn't realize the depth of this, but just to get like a little more personal, like Nimesh has been pushing me to explore this for quite some time now. And I have been resistant to it because of the tie that it has with my father. And I don't know if any of our listeners can relate, but when you have a relationship that is unhealthy in your upbringing and you finally move away from that, the last thing you want to do is bring that back into your orbit. For those who are just new to listening, 5 years ago, my 17-year-old son attempted to take his own life. And when that happened, it like broke open some old wounds that I thought I had healed. And I made the decision to sever the contact with my parents. In the dynamic that we had, it just wasn't healthy for me. And I found myself being very triggered watching my own son go through his struggles. And I realize recording this episode that simply because I have created distance between me and my father doesn't mean that the dynamic doesn't exist. The dynamic is still there.
And that's kind of what we do, right? It's that the deepest, darkest healing that we need to do. Sometimes we put it into a box in the corner of in our psyche, hoping that somehow we don't need to open that box, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we're ready to open that box and do the healing, that's when it comes up. And we've always known the work we've done together says that the masculine in you is kind of the journey that you've chosen to undertake in this lifetime, right? And you went through a lot. I'd highly recommend your book, right? It gives you a great insight into the healer that was activated with the journey that you went on. It's and it has journal prompts, and it's more than you share your story, but it's also takes people on a journey of healing, right? So I would always highly recommend it. I can include the link in the show notes. But this work is deep. The trauma that we're releasing, the societal conditioning, the religious, and then the parental is it's a lot. And when you're trying to find the balance between masculine and feminine, opening up those old wounds and healing from them is super, super important. And just, and how do you do that? You've got to be honest with yourself. And, the, having, we always talk about strong self-care routine in this, but having daily practices where you're meditating, you be in that space, you're asking some of these challenging questions, you're journaling is, is all really important. Some sort of physical activity. That self-care routine really does help you to find you.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you to find the balance to be more who you are. And Stacey, I've seen it with you. Again, it's really interesting how sometimes it's easy to see with somebody else. I see with you when you're doing the self-care and you're doing all these things, you're so much more in tune to what's happening inside you. And, this is where your biggest breakthrough. And that's what I'd recommend for everybody is having those, things like meditation, journaling, some sort of movement, kind of connecting with yourself, setting intentions, asking yourself how, what can I do that's going to lift my soul, be more creative. Prayer for me is asking, meditation is listening. And obviously, if you're looking for a guide, if you're looking for, then do look for a mentor, right? What a mentor does is looks inside you, gives you daily practices, helps things see things in you that you can't see, and accelerates your journey. None of us need fixing. Sure, a mentor or a guide should never be here to fix you, or guide you. Stacey, I went off a little tangent because I was giving you some space to process. How do you
Well,
feel?
I think so many of us feel like we're supposed to do it on our own, and I think that that's one of the things that's really interesting is if I ignore it, it'll go away, right? Is kind of a mantra for a lot of people. And then and then also like I'm strong enough, I should be able to deal with this on my own, right? And the same way that if you had gone through a horrific experience and you decided to hire a therapist, that therapist is there to help guide you through the process of processing your emotions. I would say what we do is even greater in that we process what you've been through, but then we also give you action steps to creating the life that you want. So it's not just about sitting and listening to you complain about the things that you've been through or listening to you try to process and reprogram those things, but it's more than that, right? It's giving you actionable steps. And those actionable steps on a day to day basis are what can dial you in to being more in touch with the divine masculine or feminine or both. Right. So yes, it's taking me some time to process this episode. And the funny thing is like, I can picture some of our listeners going, you know what, Stacey, like I can totally relate to you. Or you know what, Nimesh, I can totally relate to you. And I think that's the beauty of what we do is we're so open about the journey. Like we're guiding people, but we're also still having the human experience. And
100%.
I think that's important for people to know, right? Like just because you're a mentor doesn't mean that you're perfect. And the thing is like, I don't know why, but I've decided to live my life like under like the looking glass. You know what I mean? Like, like,
Yes, there's only one way it can be, right?
yes,
So,
yes. And it's crazy, but it's true. Like I get on these episodes and I'm like, okay, Stacey, today's a day. Like, you're going to operate more in the divine masculine on this episode, whatever. But then I end up being the vulnerable one. And there's a lot of times where it can be super tender, where I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have to be in the feminine again? But I go back to there's something about the power of vulnerability that people can really relate to and can connect with. And so that's the space that I go to a lot, especially on this podcast.
no, and Stacey, it's one of your superpowers. I tell you that quite often, right? It's that actually, when we first met, it was on Clubhouse. I wasn't planning to talk, and Clubhouse is a social media app, audio only, but it has, you have people on stage, you have people in the audience. I wasn't planning to come on stage and talk. It's only because I heard you being vulnerable, and as vulnerable authentically, that I came on stage to say, well, wow, well done. So, I do feel that people connect with you, with your vulnerability. And I think about my journey, I really feel at times you need to work on one or the other. It's like growing up. I was one of 9. We were refugees. I was only 3 years old when we came to the UK. I didn't have a voice. Everyone said I was really quiet. I never said anything. I was really. But now look at me. I'm using my voice. My voice is my gift. It's on the podcast and, all the different areas. And, and it's like finding your voice is masculine, but actually what you share with that voice, so on the healing side, can be feminine. So it's that's a great example of needing both, right? And then, sure, I started out in the corporate world, very much determined to become super successful there, become CEO of the world. I was like, and I was doing really well. And then I had my spiritual awakening where I had to go through some darkness, which arguably was quite feminine. So it's kind of like you go on this roller coaster of a journey and you go on and you need different things at different times, but you always need both. But one is being worked on more than the other. And it's sitting with yourself. But like I said, for the mass consciousness, I really feel it's more, you're feeling it more now than you ever before because of the conflict that we're going through, where divine feminine is rising and divine masculine is, but it's both are needed. And whatever you're working on is right for you. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. But I'm guessing most of us do have these memories, this healing that's required, that's deep, dark, maybe from even a past lifetime that we've locked away in like a Pandora's box. And maybe just like you, Stace, this episode helps people to start to unlock some of those painful things they need to release. I can definitely feel you're processing.
Oh, I am processing so much right now. And my question for you, Nims, is if someone is trying to operate more in their masculine energy, in that divine masculine, what would you advise them to do?
So the masculine, one, I'd say explore your relationship with the masculine. And what I mean by that is, what was the balance growing up? What did you experience? But then as you try and step into your masculine is all about finding your voice, speaking your truth. It's very action oriented, setting boundaries. So really think about, what are your boundaries like? What areas in your life do you need to take action and shift? And then start from there. And really, are you using your voice? Are you using your voice to truly activate who you are? That's really where it all starts. It's that, connecting with who you really are. And like I said earlier, having that self-care routine helps you to connect to you. And unless you're connected to you, because then it's all surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all you're trying to fix yourself. And unless you can connect with the real you, and that's why meditation, physical activity allows you to connect with you. And from there, you start to get insights into what's happening. And it's like, if your divine masculine is struggling, then sure, that's where you've got to really ask yourself, okay, well, what is, a lot of the time it's outside control. It's the religion, it's parental programming. Releasing that programming helps you to truly understand who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start to understand who you really are, that's when you can start to heal the divine feminine and divine masculine, because so many of us are operating from a program's perspective. It's like if you're in the corporate world, you're very much programmed, very much trained, very much, and it's like if you're heavy into religion, by the way, religions are great, but the spiritual journey is more about self. Religion is more about what you're born into and the rules. And again, all religions have a place, by the way. It's just, but your spiritual journey is about you. And if you're looking for balance in the masculine, make it all about you. Where are your boundaries? Are you setting your boundaries? Where are you speaking your truth? What area of you needs healing? What have you locked away inside you that you haven't touched for ages? That now it's time to let go. And then take some action around it. And then take from there.
Mm-hmm.
How does that sound, Stace? What did I miss?
No, I think that sounds really good. And I'm going to take your advice and really work on me and how I'm showing up in the world. I constantly want to be in a state of growth and evolution and bettering myself. And I don't think that I would be a good mentor if I didn't. Right. And so this is something that keeps on coming up, which to me says it's something I need to acknowledge. And I want to do that. I want to be committed to that.
Beautiful. That's always the first step, right? Is commitment to, and being real with yourself and taking action is always the first. And I agree. Look, as mentors, as light workers, whatever you want to call it, I feel in some way we're meant to experience these things at a deeper level, because that helps us guide the people behind us, right? It's almost like, you probably heard me talk about it before, it's almost like we need to chop down the branches, the trees, to create a path for the others behind us to follow, right? And that's the role that we've taken on. So yeah, we feel things at a deeper level. You've always felt things at a deep level. You've always had to go through things in an extreme way, but that's what your soul chose. That helps you to mentor people, right?
Yeah, I've absolutely been through quite the challenges that have helped me to guide people, but I definitely feel like there's always room to grow more. There's always room to expand more. And this is one of those areas that I feel passionate about, that I need to do more and go deeper.
There's
And
always more to do, Stace.
there's always more to do. Always.
And that's because we're a soul having a human experience, and therefore it's all about the human experience. And it's always, the day we stop growing, the day we just stop expanding, the day we stop being students is probably the day we leave this realm. Certainly is for me. So we're always going to be learning and growing. And I just think that's the beauty of why we're here. Never gets boring, right?
No, and I think it takes
just so everyone knows, there's a health warning. Working with Stace never gets boring.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I do feel like this podcast reaches so many people and helps so many people on their journey. But I just have to say, it helps us just as much.
100%.
When we're going through this process, when we're prayerfully picking topics, when we're bringing the topics to you, it's expanding and growing us as well. And that's a powerful process, because we're not just sitting here saying we're experts on all of these topics. We're learning and growing at the same time.
Yeah. And many times we're channeling the answers, right? So it's not, sometimes I say stuff and I don't even know where it comes from. I'm channeling it from somewhere else. So it's not my truth. It just comes from somewhere. And for sure, this podcast, the Akashic Records, the mentorship, everything we do, healers need healing too. So when we're healing other people, we're healing ourselves. It's just, and that's, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a healer, then activate the healer in you. And sometimes you heal when you're healing others. There's power in that.
There's so much power in that.
So Stacey, as we start to get to the end of this podcast, you know what I'm going to ask you? Give us some, any kind of thoughts you have to kind of help us close out, but also any general prompts you have for our listeners.
So the first question I would ask you is, are you operating in a space of more divine masculine or divine feminine, which you may not have thought about before? So this is a great time to grab your journal and write about it and see which space you're in more and why. You heard me kind of have my aha moment today about organized religion and how that impacted me, and talking it out kind of gave me that space. So I would encourage you to try to sit and journal with this. But the other thing I would encourage you to do is sit and have a conversation with another person about it, because sometimes processing things verbally can bring you some aha moments that you didn't see coming. And I definitely didn't see this coming today.
It's great when you have plans, Stacey. It's even better when your plans don't come true, because the universe's plans come true. And you love it. And I just like I said, we don't plan for that, and I just love where this podcast goes. And so if our voices resonated, if we touched a part of your soul and heart that really resonates with you, reach out, send us a message. We'd love to connect. You can schedule a free discovery call. Maybe we can help you with our mentorship program. We have our free Zoom coming up too, where you get 90 minutes of us in a live environment where we open the group Akashic Records, we do a meditation, you experience us at a different level. You get to connect with us, and it's free. You can be on screen. You don't have to be on screen. It's just a way to connect with like-minded people. It's always super, super healing. And that is going to be on the 18th. I'll include a link for you to register in the show notes. Do please join us. I love that session. It's a time where we can just be, we can give back, and it's another way that we give back to Slides podcast. So thank you, Stacey, as always. Thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for being you. Thank you to the listeners for really kind of helping us and guiding us. I'm sending you all so much love and light. And Stacey, I'm going to hand over to you to close this out.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. This podcast would not be what it is without you, our dear listeners, and we're grateful for every single one of you. We love feedback, so reach out to us if you have any feedback, topics that you would like us to cover, etc. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye for now.